Welcome, and thank you for joining me for another episode of the Wandering Watercolor. Today we are painting the eighth, yes, the eighth page of the Plants and Flowers watercolor coloring book. So let's get started. So this is the eighth page. Please let me know if the lighting is weird in any way. I always try to make sure that it's really well lit so that you can see everything well as I paint. But yes, this is the eighth page. I always try to make sure I have a piece of scrap paper that I can test some colors and strokes on. The paint, this is the paint that I make myself. I make it from scratch. If you have any other paint, it'll work just fine. As anyone that does watercolor will tell you, the most important thing is the paper, and then it's the paint, and then it's the brush. The brush is probably the least important thing. This is the brush that I will be using, and I always recommend having a place to mix your colors, usually just a plate. This is just a soap dish. You can pick them up very cheaply, pretty much at any store that sells bath and like utensils and bath goods. Anyway, 2 jars of water on the side off camera, just so that I always recommend having 2 jars, just because it's easier to keep your brush clean, because one of them gets dirty pretty quickly. And then a rag is always useful, many uses for it. But anyway, let's get started. The first thing I'll do is I will wet my paints, and I'm using a little spray bottle that you can get, again, pretty much anywhere, any one-stop shop store like Target or Walmart. I think I've even seen them at the Dollar Tree, honestly, or online. Just Google it, you'll find it pretty quickly. And the very first thing we're going to do is we're going to color these pots that are down here. And we'll start with this one. This is an aloe vera plant. The plants in this image is an aloe vera plant, a rubber plant, and I think a different kind of rubber plant. I forget. My wife told me, but I forget. I'm not very good with plants. Although I do love painting plants just because how interesting they are. So what we'll do is we will grab some orange. Side note, orange is the hardest of all the colors to paint with because it takes up the smallest amount of space on the color spectrum. So it's actually really hard to make sure that you get all of the different tones or different shadings of orange. And I'm going to grab some yellow as well. This is kind of close to the color we're going for, maybe a little more yellow. And this is just the first layer, so it's just a flat wash. We can add some texture to it. Sometimes it's nice to add a little bit of texture as you're making the strokes, especially when it's on straight white paper, because you can emphasize the strokes by the use of the paper texture. Like, for example, okay, I'll go ahead and I'll start, and you can go ahead, even if you go outside of the lines a little bit, not a big deal. You can go like this, okay. And then you see how I'm purposefully leaving some strokes just so you can kind of see the texture. Now, I think that makes for a much more interesting painting, really, overall, especially if you vary the textures from different surface to surface. And then I'm just going to grab some straight yellow and then just go ahead and lay it in here, mix it in, and then I kind of like how that looks. Obviously, it'll look much lighter once it dries, but for now, this is totally fine. Don't worry about going outside of the lines. That can add a lot of charm and character to the image. And then for the one back here, we're gonna go more for like a clay pot look. We're just gonna grab the I have 2 browns. The reason I have 2 browns when I make my palette, when I mix my paint, is one of them is really good for just dark earthy tones, if you're dirt and mud and just darker brown. And then this brown over here I actually specifically made it through a lot of trial and error because it's great for building the base skin tone, whether you're painting somebody that has like a lighter or a darker complexion, because you can actually go either way with it. If you add more of the darker tones, more cooler tones, you can make it a darker skin tone, and if you add more of the lighter tones like orange and yellow, you can actually tilt it more towards the lighter skin tones. So I will eventually make a watercoloring book specifically on skin tones, but it's a more advanced topic. So enough of that. So we're grabbing our color here, and again we're just laying down the base layer, and I'm just gonna go a little more textural here. I'm pressing down a little harder against the paper, and again, don't worry too much about going outside of the lines. I know a lot of people worry about that, especially in the beginning. I'm gonna rinse off my brush, and then I'm just gonna kind of like dab it a little bit on the edge of the jar to get some of the excess water. And while the brush itself is still pretty moist, I'm just gonna kind of go ahead and go a little bit like this. And what that does is it kind of leaves a spot. You can see in the middle it's lighter than the edges, and that's also a good way to add texture to whatever surface you're painting. And next we will focus on this one over here on the left side of the image, this pot, and the base tone for that one is going to be purple. I'm gonna grab that and add a little bit of brown. We don't want the purple to be too overpowering. We still want it to be kind of like a clay looking earthy purple, and I think that's pretty good right there. And what we'll do is we'll go ahead and we'll add it along the edges first. So all around like that, and here kind of like that. And I'm not being too careful about how I'm laying down the colors. I am being more careful around the details around the plants here themselves. Okay, and now I'm gonna rinse off my brush, and still keeping it fairly wet, I'm just gonna go in, just kind of go like this, mix in those edges of the brush strokes that we laid down initially. And I'm just gonna dry off my brush a little bit. There's that handy dandy rag. And what I'm gonna do is, when you dry off the brush, when you pick up the parts that are moist, you can see the distinct difference in tone that's being left behind. Okay, and that's fine. I'm gonna add a little more of the purple over here. I'm just gonna grab and then just kind of like do on the outline down here, maybe along the edge. Try to cover up some of that blending, make it a little smoother, because it was developing too much of an edge. I didn't like how that looked. So there we go. I'm gonna rinse off my brush. I didn't mention, I forgot to mention earlier, but as far as the shadows go for this piece, we are imagining that the light is coming straight down. So most of the shadow will be, on the underside of the leaves, and as well as on the pots themselves. Okay, but so that's that. Now we can start on coloring in the plants themselves. I'm going to move this little soap dish and bring out another one so I can mix more of the green colors. So I'm gonna grab this green. Oop, drop my brush there. Not too big of a deal. Happens to all of us. Okay, so I'm just gonna grab that. I did get crap. Sorry, I looked at the screen. I wasn't paying attention. Yeah, definitely always try to look at what you're painting. Yeah, don't worry about these two little guys. It's what we can do is actually while they're still wet, I'm just gonna grab my brush and I'm just gonna try to pick up as much as possible. Gonna wet my brush again, and then just kind of pick up. If you end up having some kind of like blunder like that, just do that. You can always fix it much better. You get a much better result trying to fix it while it's still wet. If you want to. Sometimes I just like leaving my mistakes on the paper just because, you know, it looks more organic. It looks more human. I know, like, I did some experiments with AI art, and although I think it has its place, I don't like it just because it just looks very synthetic. That's part of the appeal of watercolor, at least to me, is that it looks very organic. I think that's the best way to put it. I don't know how else to put it. But yeah, so I'm mixing in the green, and then we'll start with the aloe vera plant, which has more of a blue-green to it. So we'll grab some of this blue, and you don't need a lot. Like the colors change pretty rapidly. Let's see. So that looks close. I'm just gonna take a little more, just push it more towards the blue side of the color wheel, and I think that's pretty good. That's pretty good. So I'm just going to add more water just so we have more to work with, and also make it more transparent as it's being laid down. And basically we're just doing a flat wash. So this time we're not concerned about texture. We just want to get the base color in, and just throwing it all in there, trying to stay within the lines, and if we don't stay completely within the lines, that's okay. It's not the end of the world. I honestly focus a lot more on color and how the color looks and the color composition, as opposed to the minute details of, you know, borders and following the form exactly, just because you can have a very beautiful drawing, but if the colors aren't there in a painting, it just it loses a lot of the appeal. So I think it's more important to focus on how the colors look as opposed to how the texture or the form looks. Okay, so we have that in there. While that's drying, we will focus on this one right here. And for that one, we're basically just gonna use just straight green. Now, the green that I make myself, I made all these paints from scratch. Like I ordered the pigment and then mixed it in with gum arabic and glycerin. So I don't actually have like any specific name for all these colors. I just call them as I see them. And I know that a lot of paint manufacturers have like very specific names for their different shades of green and brown and orange and all that. So I think maybe for this green that I'm using, maybe it'll be something close to sap green or yellow green, something like that, depending on what paint you're using. Okay, so there we go. So that's a good amount. We'll add some more water, and then we'll just go in for the base layer. I'm just gonna go ahead and lay it all in. Now, I know I mentioned earlier that orange is the hardest of the colors to work with because of the small amount of space that you have to work with in terms of the color spectrum. Green is the exact opposite. Green takes up the most amount of space on the color spectrum, and it is by far the easiest to work with because you can get widely varying shades of green, and you can still tell them like all of the colors apart, which can make for a lot of interesting monochromatic paintings, especially if you throw in some like complementary red here and there. A lot of I know I've had art teachers in the past that would urge students to shy away from just painting a lot of green, just because it is a little easier to work with. Therefore, it leaves people more comfortable. But color theory is it's like a whole nother art form, man. You can study color theory for the rest of your life and still only grasp a portion of it. But yeah, okay, so that's that one. I'm just gonna step back and look at it just for a moment. Okay, looks okay for now. I actually think this green looks a little too close to this green, but that's okay. We'll go ahead and we'll fix that when we add the shadows, because the shadows will help distinguish the color much more. So next, I'm gonna go ahead and wet my paint some more. I'm gonna grab a bunch of yellow. Grab some more yellow. Okay, and then grab some green. Some more green. That's probably good right there, because we want the background plant to be much more yellow-green. So it's leaning a lot more towards the yellow. Okay, let me just test that. Yeah, that looks great. That looks perfect. I'm just going to dilute it with a little bit more water so we have more to work with. Okay, and same thing, just a flat wash of yellow-green. And again, just don't worry about making it perfect. Just focus more on the color as opposed to the details. Color can be very powerful in terms of evoking emotions in the viewer or making the image looking just much more harmonious and pleasant. You can do so much with color. It doesn't even, it can be just completely abstract and still look great if you have a good balance of just different types of color. Okay. Cover all that in. Okay. And I noticed that this leaf, as I'm laying down the color, that it hadn't completely mixed the two colors, so it looks a little different, but that's also fine. Okay, and so there we go. That's that. I'm gonna rinse off my brush. And now I'm gonna bring back the other plate that I had. I'm just gonna grab a little bit of brown. Not too much, that's probably good. Well, actually that's a little too bright, so I'm gonna add a little bit of dark blue. There we go, just kind of make it a little bit of a darker, more neutral brown, because we're going to add the dirt of the plants here. Okay. Okay, there we go. Here, rinse my brush. And then we will start to focus on the shadows, with the very first thing being the shadow that the plants and the pots are casting onto the ground that they're standing on. And we want to mix kind of a cool shadow color. The best way to do that would be I'm gonna grab the light blue, put that there, and then we're gonna grab a little bit of brown. These two, oh yeah, that was way too much brown, when you mix these two together, you do, well, in the right ratios, you end up getting a nice kind of cool gray. So we're gonna add a little more blue. And shadows are usually always cooler, so if you were to paint a shadow on, let's say, a red surface, you would want to cool off the shade of red that you're using for the shadow by using some green or blue-green, or even just a little bit of blue. I mean, again, you can do so much with color. Okay, so that's a good color right there for the shadow. And so what we're gonna do, we're just gonna try to imagine how the shape of the shadow will be based on how it's falling down onto the ground, like the plants, how they're projecting the shadow. So I'm gonna go a little bit like this, right there, and then a little bit like this, because this one is kind of like poking out, causing a shadow down here. A little bit of the pot here, like that. This one is sticking out like that, so maybe a little bit like this. And don't worry about making it perfect. Just give it kind of, because shadows are kind of distorted representation of the object casting the shadow anyway, so it doesn't have to be perfect. I'm gonna add this right there. Okay, and that. Okay, that right there. Okay, that looks pretty good. It does look a little unnatural because we haven't added any shadows to the actual pots, because they have form, so there would be some. I mean, this one kind of looks a little bit like there's shadow just because of the difference in the color, kind of like how we took out some here. But we'll go ahead and we'll add some shadows to the actual pots, and it'll look much better. Rinse off my brush. I'm gonna grab this again. And first we will focus on the orange one again. We'll grab a little bit of brown, a little bit, and just a very slight amount of the light blue. There we go. Kind of lay that in here, mix it up, and some more orange, definitely. So this is pretty good. I would say this is pretty sufficient for what we're going for. And the first thing we will do is this aloe vera stem here that's going off. We're gonna go like this, and then bring it down, kind of like cutting the corner and then just covering all of that up right here. Perfect. We're also going to add a little bit, kind of like a small line right here, just to show that there is a bit of an indent for the curve of the pot, and then a little bit shadowed down here, kind of like that. And then I'm going to rinse off my brush, dry my brush, just keep it slightly moist so we can kind of blend the edges here, like that. There we go. We're going to leave this edge much harsher, and the rest of it we just kind of blend in. And the reason being is, you can see, like, if you look at the page and the shadow that my hand is casting onto the page, it's a very soft shadow, and the closer I get, the shadow gets harder. So we're basically trying to suggest that because the angle of the pot it's a slight angle and the light is far away, it's going to cast a soft transitioning shadow, and then here the shadow is much harder because the object casting the shadow is directly above it. I hope that made sense. If not, leave a comment. I'll probably just make another video explaining shadows. It is kind of an advanced topic, just because you can get really deep into how to paint shadows. But yeah, that I think that's anybody can understand that analogy. Okay, so the next part will be, we'll go ahead and we'll paint the one back here. So the pot back here is a little obstructed by the pots in front of it, as well as the leaves that are all kind of intersecting in this middle area. So this shadow on this pot back here is going to be a little more complicated. But yeah, you'll see what I mean. So I'm just gonna grab some of this brown and mix it up here. Like that. I'm going to grab just a little bit of the dark blue and mix it up with that. Okay, and I'm going to grab a little bit of the lighter brown too. Kind of mix all that in. And that's pretty good. That looks right about what we want. So first, this aloe vera stem that's poking backward, kind of like at an angle, we're gonna add a little bit of that just to show that it's casting some of the shadow onto the pot behind it, like that. And it's very close, so we're going to keep the shadow very well defined, as well as this right here, just to show another one. There we go. And then we're going to kind of go over here and do a little bit of an outline, as well as kind of circle around like this, and then pulling it up. Okay, and doing all of that, and then just kind of following the curve of this leaf right here. Go like that. All right, so I'm just gonna rinse my brush, dry it off a little bit so it's still moisture in there, and then kind of distort, or soften, I should say, the edge down here. Just a little bit. Not a lot, just a little bit, like that. There we go. And that should be sufficient. I'm gonna dry off my brush some more. There we go. Okay, that looks good. And then this pot right here, we're just going to grab some purple, mix it up right there, grab some of the dark brown, mix it up all together, grab some more purple. Okay. Grab a little bit of the dark blue. That looks just about right. Yeah, test that one on the side here. Yeah, that looks about right. Maybe just a little more purple, just a little bit. There we go. Okay, we're good there. So first, there's a leaf over here that's kind of sticking out towards us. So that we're going to go ahead and we're gonna do a little bit on the inside of the where the dirt is. I'm gonna go in like this, and then we're gonna do a little bit like this, coming to a point right about there, and we're just gonna mix it all up, or not mix it up, but try to do it kind of like a flat wash. And I'm trying to make sure that the edges here that meet where the edge of the pot is, that they look off center, meaning that you can tell that there's kind of like a change in the height, so it's kind of like it's going over a little bit. Okay, so that looks good. And it looks a little dark right now, but remember, watercolor always dries much lighter, so that's fine for now. And then we're gonna do the same thing over here. Like this leaf, the shadow of this leaf is going over like this here in the corner. There we go. I'm gonna cover that up back there as well. And then we are gonna give a little bit of a thin line, like an edge for the edge of the pot itself, kind of like that. And then also cover up some of the pot back here for the other leaves, like that. And then also just give a little bit, kind of like we did with the pot in the background here. We're just gonna boost the tone of the shadow a little bit. There we go. I'm gonna dry off my brush and then just kind of soften the edge there, like that. There we go. Alright, I'm gonna rinse my brush. So you can see shadows add such a dimension to everything. And I'm going to bring back my other plate for the other colors. And we'll start off with this one, the aloe vera plant. We're gonna grab some green, mix it up. And instead of using the light blue, this time we'll grab the dark blue. It gives a much darker blue-green. Let's see. So that looks pretty good, but we really want to push the values here. So we definitely want to make it much darker because we want to add more definition. And we also want to distinguish the color from the other plants. And the shadows really help do that. And so basically, now that we have that mixed, I'm going in only where I would think that the shadow would fall, like over here. Definitely underneath this stem, like that. This one right here just kind of goes slowly. It's always awkward painting for these tutorials because I'm always trying not to get in the way of the camera so you can see what I'm doing. And if at any time it's difficult to see, please let me know so that I could try to fix that in the future, or maybe play around with my settings so I can make sure that people can see everything. Okay, there we go. There we go. Like that. And then back here. Basically, I'm on all of these, I'm just painting the underbelly of all of the stems, and then also a little bit in the center just to show that there's an indent. And if you've ever seen aloe vera plant, you know that there's a little bit of an indent Not throughout the whole stem, but just some parts of the stem. So this helps kind of define that. So like that. Okay, so I'm gonna rinse off my brush. See how much better that looks? I'm always blown away by how much dimension and how much form just adding just a simple layer of shadow adds to any object. It does have to be sufficiently contrasting, but yeah, I really enjoy watching how that comes out. So next I'm just gonna grab some more of that green. I'm gonna wet my paint here again. Grab a good amount of green. There we go. And then we're going to grab some brown. And it's actually a pretty good color right there. We just want to make sure that we have enough of it mixed up for this plant right here. I'm going to grab more green. And a little more dark brown. Okay, that looks good. I'm just gonna test it out here. Oh yeah, that's good stuff. And remember, you can always kind of shape the tip of your brush, especially while there's pigment on it. If you kind of just like roll it and clear off some of it, it'll help bring it to more of a point. Okay, so same thing. We're kind of imagining the top part is going to be more in light and more on the bottom in the underbelly of the leaves. We're going to add the shadow. So I'm adding a little bit of shadow here to show the indent of the leaf, and then a little bit like this. Okay. Same right here. You kind of see the curve of the leaf. And then most of this will be covered up like that. Pretty much all of the leaves underneath here will be in shadow, or the stems I should say. And I'm going to add a little bit. This leaf that's kind of coming out, it droops down a little bit, so I'm just going to add a little bit of a shading to emphasize that, and the indent on the inside as well. There we go. And we're going to do right here like that. Okay. All right. And then showing out, emphasizing the indent here, kind of adding the curvature. All that. All that. Okay. And then the underbelly of this leaf right here. And then over here. And I'm always trying to use, with leaves especially nice and curved ones like this one, try to use circles and curves to emphasize the form of the shadow. Don't do like straight angle edges for the shadows, just because it'll look unnatural. Just try to keep it kind of curvy to follow the contour of the plant to make it look more organic. Okay, like that. And last one here, we're going to add a little bit more of a dent there, like that. And right here. Grab some more. Okay, like that, and right here. And feel free to go back and add more in certain areas if you want to, if you feel like it's necessary. But I think that looks pretty good. I'm just going to step back for a moment. Yeah, that looks pretty good. I just realized some of the light is kind of like reflecting off of the more wet area over here. So it might look a little weird on the camera, but it'll you see what it looks like when it dries. But you could probably still see for the most part what it looks like. Okay, and then the plant in the background, we're still going to grab some yellow, not as much just because we're going to mix more of a shadow. So we'll grab some of the green here, kind of mix it up. And I'm actually going to grab a little bit of the dark brown. Ah, too much. Darn it. Okay, I'm just going to grab a bunch of yellow, kind of mix it up. Some green. Okay, that looks pretty good for the shadow color that we'll need for this one. Let me just double check. Yeah, that'll be fine. Except we just need to mix a lot more of it. So grab more yellow. Grab more green. Grab more brown. Darn it, that brown is way too strong. Too much pigment in there. And grab more green. Bring it more towards the green side. Okay, so that looks, yeah, I'm just gonna put a little more green in there. Okay, that should be pretty good. Let's see. Yeah, that's fine. That's good. So now we have more than enough here. I'm gonna sculpt my brush a little bit. And I'm just gonna start right here. Just gonna do a little bit of a curve, kind of like that. A little bit in the middle for that indent. And that's that. Same with this one. A little bit of a curve, like that. And this one, kind of follow the shape of the leaf, like that. Maybe a little bit on top here, just to show that the leaf on top is just causing a little bit of a shadow. There we go. And then probably this one back here, we'll just cover that up in shadow. We can kind of show off the stem that's coming up, and then like that. Okay, just making sure my paint's mixed up well here. And then just basically the same recipe going all the way down, just following the curvature of the leaves. And just laying down the color. Just like that. And coloring in the one in the back, one that's being covered. And over here. And over here. Maybe cover this one back here. Like that. And then I'm going to start adding a little bit of a shadow on the stem, just because there is a bit of a curvature, and then it gets darker down here. which will also help add a little bit of contrast between the aloe vera plant and make it pop out a little more. There we go, like that. And this leaf, there's a little more shadow on the top because the one above it. And then going down here, like that. And put the one behind it in shadow, and then this one, like that, like that. I'm gonna put most of this one in shadow just because of where it's located. Probably all of it, yeah, that's good. And then a little bit over here on this side, like that. Some in the center. And some on the stem back here. And just go slowly, no need to rush. And then I think this one is the last one. Over here. In the middle. And I think that's pretty much it. I'm just gonna rinse off my brush and then step back for a moment. Yeah, I think that looks pretty good. I'm just gonna compare. So this is what it started off as, and then this is what it finished as. I love looking at the difference, you know, like started off like that and like that. I love seeing that. Anyway. Okay, and you can always add outlines, like black outlines if you want to. I feel like because of the intensity of the shadow that we added to this one, there's enough contrast and color differentiation to be able to tell everything apart. So I'm happy with how this looks. Okay, so that was pretty much it. I think, what are we at? 47 minutes. So if you stuck all the way through, thank you. Thank you for joining me today. Hopefully everything made sense. If at any point there's anything that didn't make sense, just feel free to leave a comment. I'll try to respond usually within 24 hours. And with that, I will see you next time.